Hey guys, today we're going to finish up your Unit 2 video lesson. We're going to talk about Jefferson's presidency and how he kind of winds up making some concessions to his political philosophy in order to do some things as president. He actually strengthens the power of the national government during his time in. We're also going to talk about the War of 1812 and how that comes about and what the impacts are. So the election of 1800 was a very hard fought one between John Adams and Jefferson. It's important because it's the first time that power passes from one political party to the next in the United States. The Federalists had controlled power up until that point, but it was the Democratic Republican Thomas Jefferson versus Federalist John Adams. Vicious campaign. Supporters of each side made their arguments and letters to the editor, newspaper articles, and there were many wild accusations and scandalous stories spread throughout the election. Federalists claimed that Jefferson was pro-French, dangerously so, and that he wanted to destroy religion because he was interested in science and philosophy and believed in religious freedom. The Democratic Republicans claimed that Adams wanted to be king, wanted to crown himself king, and that the Federalists were trying to limit Americans' rights, and they used the Aliens and Sedition Acts as proof of their claims. So the election ends in a tie between Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr. The political parties did not specify who the party's preferred candidate was. They were both Democratic Republicans. So the House had to decide the election, but it was deadlocked at 35 votes apiece. So Hamilton urged the Federalists to vote for Jefferson because he just didn't trust Burr. And on the 36th vote, the 36th ballot, Jefferson was actually chosen president by the House of Representatives. These problems with the voting system led to the 12th Amendment, which said that electors would cast separate ballots for the president and the vice president. Burr held a grudge for supporting Jefferson for years after that, and later on, Hamilton also works to prevent Burr from becoming the governor of New York. Burr challenges him to a duel later in their life, or later on in 1804, and Hamilton, having his honor impugned, consented to the duel, and Burr killed Hamilton, which really destroyed Burr's political career. So Jefferson wanted to reduce the power and size of government. That was his philosophy. He got rid of many taxes. Only customs duties and the sale of lands would produce revenue for the government. And he also reduced the size of the executive department staff. In addition, Jefferson was able to reduce the size of the Army and the Navy, built up many merchant ships when they were attacked by pirates. So he did have to rebuild the Navy a little bit to help defend against the Barbary Coast pirates. Now, the biggest probably impact that Jefferson makes as president is the Louisiana Purchase. Napoleon Bonaparte wanted to build a French empire, and he did regain France's former lands of the Louisiana Territory, which were controlled by Spain at the time. But he realized that, if he wanted to control Europe, he had to concentrate his forces in Europe. So he basically decided to sell the Louisiana Territory. Jefferson sent James Monroe to Paris to try to purchase. He only wanted New Orleans and West Florida, but France offered to sell all of the Louisiana Territory. They didn't have time to get permission from Jefferson, so they went ahead and signed an agreement, and for $15 million, the United States almost doubled its territory. Now, the Constitution didn't directly give Jefferson the authority to buy this territory, but he kind of went back on his idea of strict constructionism and said that the right to acquire territory was implicit in the president's power to make treaties. So he kind of goes back on his idea of strict constructionism. Jefferson also, then he sends the Corps of Discovery, usually called the Lewis and Clark Expedition, to explore the land of Louisiana. This was led by Meriwether Lewis, who was Jefferson's secretary, and an experienced frontiersman by the name of William Clark. Their ultimate goal was to reach the Pacific Ocean, map the country, survey its natural history, including plants, animals, landforms, and of course, they were helped by their Shoshone guide, Sacagawea, who's very popular. Another important expedition was led by Zebulon Pike in 1805 that traveled 2,000 miles to explore the upper Mississippi Valley. He also explored the Southwest and gathered information about the economy and defenses of the Spanish in New Mexico and Texas. The role of the Supreme Court also changes during this period. Federal legislatures in 1801, before Jefferson became president, created new positions in the judicial branch with the Judiciary Act of 1801. So the Federalists that were on their way out tried to make changes at the time. So John Adams filled them, appointed a Federalist to them before he left office. Adams signed the documents, and they had to be delivered to each man to make the appointment official. So Jefferson took office the next day and just said, well, I'm not going to do this. James Madison, the new Secretary of State, refused to deliver the documents. So what happens is William Marbury was one of the men who was appointed. He didn't receive his commission. So he sued the federal government. And he claimed that the Judiciary Act of 1789 gave the court the power to force Madison to deliver the commission. The court ruled that the Constitution gave the Supreme Court the power to hear only certain kinds of cases. It did not give the power to force Madison. It ruled that the Constitution did not give the court the power to force Madison to deliver Marbury's commission. But what it did do was rule the Judiciary Act of 1789 unconstitutional. This is important because Marbury versus Madison, this case establishes this idea of judicial review, the idea that the Constitution or that the Supreme Court can rule something unconstitutional. There's nowhere in the Constitution that says that. It says that the Supreme Court interprets the Constitution. So in this case, they interpret the Constitution to give them the power to rule laws unconstitutional. So during this time, you have tensions with the British rising even more. And there were unresolved tensions on the northwest frontier, on the seas, and all of these are going to eventually lead to war later on. Of course, the Napoleonic Wars affected American merchant shipping because both countries were trying to prevent the United States from trading with each other. So France and Britain each tried to cut off each other's access to European ports. Both ignored American neutrality. So they would both attack American ships if they were trying to ship to the other. Of course, the British were more of a threat because they had a more powerful navy and because they would often impress American sailors, they would capture ships and force those sailors to serve in the British Navy. In 1807, the British ship the Leopard stopped the American frigate Chesapeake and seized 4 Americans. At that time, Congress passed the Embargo Act, which prohibited export to foreign countries. Problem is, this is a negative for the economy because merchants aren't able to trade. So the goods piled up in warehouses, shops sat in harbor, goods, supplies sat in harbors, and people lost their jobs and businesses failed. So it didn't hurt the British or the French. It just hurt American businessmen. So anyway, by 1808, Jefferson has retired, he's left office, and James Madison is the new president. And new laws passed that reopens all trade except that with Britain and France. However, you still have conflict on the Northwest territories. Anti-British feelings are growing, and the British are trying to rebuild their old alliances with Native Americans. So William Henry Harrison, a popular military leader of the time, basically, or the governor of the Indiana Territory, carries out Jefferson's new Native American policy. So Native Americans can choose either to become farmers and join white society or move west of the Mississippi. So this policy of pushing Native Americans west continues during this time. So as Harrison implemented the policy, Native Americans made treaties in which they often lost millions of acres of tribal lands in Michigan, Indiana, and Illinois. One leader or two leaders, Tecumseh and Tenskwatawa, his brother, become important leaders. And Tenskwatawa was seen as a prophet or religious leader. And thousands of people came to hear him speak against white culture at a village known as Prophetstown in modern-day Indiana. And he taught people to reject white culture. His brother, Tecumseh, also called Shooting Star, was an inspiring leader in his own and becomes a military leader. So he begins to unite his brother's followers and train basically for the military defense of his people. So in 1811, Tecumseh was away, and William Henry Harrison, leads an army to attack Prophetstown and burns it down, destroys it, and it's called the Battle of Tippecanoe. It makes William Henry Harrison a national hero. In fact, he'll run for president later with the slogan "Tippecanoe and Tyler too." So anyway, you had the Chesapeake and Leopard neutrality incidents, which angered a lot of American politicians. Plus, you had the fact that the British were trying to rile up the natives in the Northwest, and many American politicians start calling for war. These people are known as war hawks. They hate the British, and they want to go to war with them. So in 1812, the United States officially declares war on Great Britain. The war was fought on land and sea from Canada to Louisiana. It was a large-scale conflict, and much of the war actually took place along the U.S.-Canadian border. War hawks had dreams of being able to expand the U.S. territory into Canada. So the British wind up staging a massive blockade off the coast of the United States in New Orleans, and it really damages the American economy. And what happens is the U.S. Navy tries to break out of the blockade. So in 1812, the USS Constitution, August 1812, the USS Constitution sank the British Guerriere and kind of break the blockade. So what happens is the naval war moves onto the Great Lakes. Remember, we talked about the border of Canada is very important. So the United States is able to be victorious there in the Battle of Lake Erie. So some key naval victories are very important. The United States makes several unsuccessful invasions of Canada. Part of the reason is Tecumseh joins the British in a campaign to capture Detroit and invade Ohio, so the U.S. forces are put on the defensive. At the Battle of the Thames, Harrison's army meets British and Indian forces, and it was victorious. And during that battle, Tecumseh was killed, which really ended the British-Native American alliance. Tennessee militia leader Andrew Jackson also rises to prominence during this point because he leads a force against the Creeks at the Battle of Horseshoe Bend, where women, children, and warriors alike were massacred after the battle led by Andrew Jackson. All right, so in 1814, the British fleet sails into the Chesapeake Bay. They basically invade Virginia and march on Washington. And Washington is pretty much defenseless. The British Army marches in almost unopposed, except for a small contingent of United States Marines. There they burned several major buildings, including the White House. They also bombed Fort McHenry at Baltimore Harbor, but after the overnight battle, of course, the flag was still flying, and this inspired the Francis Scott Key lyrics to the Star Spangled Banner, which will later be set to music and called the national anthem. The final battle is the Battle of New Orleans, which was led by Andrew Jackson, a victorious battle for the Americans, although technically the war had already been ended by the Treaty of Ghent. The peace treaty between the United States and Great Britain was signed in 1814 in Ghent, Belgium. And what you see is basically the War of 1812 is important because it establishes the the United States as a military power in its own right, and kind of secures its freedom moving forward. So we'll continue when we get it next year.